what's going on, y'all? T-Bob here.
And Jake as well.
And you're about to watch a little OTB LSU.
We're going to give you all the latest, greatest between LSU football, baseball, women's basketball, softball, and everything in between.
Bottom line, if you want to talk Tigers, keep it locked, subscribe, like it, and we hope you enjoy it.
Obviously, this is going to be a conversation dominated by the Nick Saban piece, as it should be. For all the things OTB is, in a lot of ways, we are mainly a college football show. You know, we touch on everything else. We like everything else. But college football is both mine and Jake's wheelhouse. It's what we grew up in. It's how we make our living. It's what we love. It's what we did back in the day. And, well, this man played for the very man we'll be talking about. When you're talking about college football, it is unquestioned who the best coach of all time is. And it's Nick Saban. And now this guy who has had a chokehold on the game for nearly 15 years is no more. And I know, again, I kind of said this live reacting last night, but like nothing lasts forever. I understand that conceptually, right? But there are certain people who become so powerful and so constant in your lives that you think that, okay, well, they're just never going to go away, right? It's as natural as like the sun rising in the morning and setting in the evening. And so when it does happen, when the inevitable, you know it's inevitable, even if you can't wrap your head around it, when it does happen, it's shocking. Like I will always remember where I was yesterday when I heard the news. Jake, where were you? Were you on air when this broke?
Yeah, I was on air.
Wow.
We just come into the third hour of the show, and I, like you, when people ask me all the time, when's Coach Saban going to retire? I always said, never. He's never going to retire. Like, he will go out of this world coaching football. Like, he had that feel to it to you, so it never felt like it was actually going to happen. And so, yeah, I was on air, and it was a perfect day for me because, as you know, in off-campus, we switch co-hosts every single day. We have, like, ACC and Big Ten and SEC and Big 12 just so we can, you know, kind of hit everywhere. And I was on with Doring yesterday, so it actually worked out really well. So we were actually going into hour number 3. And then because of it being Nick Saban, we continued our coverage all the way till 9 p.m.
Oh, wow.
I mean, we got rid of all the games we were covering on SiriusXM, and we just kept going.
Yeah.
And CD and I, and then Cole Kubelik jumped on. We went for a couple of more hours. I think we ended up doing 9 hours of radio yesterday, and then Caroline Fenton jumped on with Dari Noka. And so, like, it was that big of a deal where they went and canceled all the game play-by-play that they had. They went and got other SEC talent, and they're bringing them in to react to it because, one, we didn't see it coming yesterday. I mean, that was kind of out of nowhere. And then, again, like you just –
played it close to the vest.
They did. And you can say, well, there was signs this year. Okay, there's been signs a couple of different years. But he just had a coaching job where his team wasn't the normal team. They weren't the normal team. And I know you don't like saying it was his best coaching job because of
No.
who he had.
I don't want to be misconstrued. I think it can be close to and maybe even his best coaching job. Definitely showed the most improvement. Definitely one of the most flawed teams ever had. I just mean we ran a little overboard at times with acting like this was like poor old Alabama, right? They were weak in some critical spots that they had to figure out. But they were still, I mean, you're still creating a team out of the most talented foundation. That's all I was saying.
And then he's said time and time again, this is the most fun that I've had coaching.
Yeah.
It's the most fun team that he's had coaching.
Because I really feel like, and that's why I didn't know if he'd come back, because he was getting some juice from actually being in dogfights.
Yeah, I know.
It's hard to motivate from ahead. When you're beating teams down by 40, it's hard to keep that edge. It's way easier when you have the threat of losing looming over you.
And again, like when this broke, you know, a lot of people are like, okay, let me fact check, is this real? When I saw who it was that broke it, that it was Chris Lowe of ESPN, I said, oh, this is it.
Yeah.
This is real. No one in sports media is as close to Nick Saban as Chris Lowe is. And so I knew that was something that Coach Saban told him. He said, I want you to put it out there, and he does. And also, CeeLo, I talked to him. I called him. I'm like, look, I want to see. Like, I just want to hear Chris say it. And he goes, Hess, he was recruiting coaches, assistant coaches, about an hour before he went and told his team that he was retiring. Worked all the way up into it. Was like calling, vetting defensive coordinators right up until he went and told his team that he was going to retire. I was like, that's the most Saban thing ever. And we'll get into maybe who replaces Nick Saban because good luck, bud, whoever that is.
Well,
it's going to take somebody special.
It's very much looking like Dan Lanning.
And how many times during the football season did we say, what is wrong with the Oregon job? Willie Taggart, first chance he gets, he goes to Florida State, and everybody's like, oh, he's going home. I'm like, dude, he's from Florida. He played at Western Kentucky.
Yeah.
All right? Florida State's not where he played. Like Mario Cristobal, or as we like to call it, Mario Cristofraud here on this program, him going back to Miami, I think Oregon's a much better job. It's like, okay, he went home. But Oregon is like, time and time again, they're like right there. And then the coaches just like go elsewhere for somewhere bigger or better. So like, yeah, like with all of that being known and Dan Lanning and his resume and what he's done at Oregon, his ties to the Southeastern Conference, already being a coach in that conference, yeah, that one makes a lot of sense.
It's and it sucks for Oregon fans because this was likely the sole job that Lanning would have left Oregon for.
Like literally.
I don't think. I actually have no doubt of
maybe
it.
Georgia, if Kirby did in fact like go to the Falcons or something, but that's like a lot of like maybe sort of.
Maybe I don't even know about that. But whatever. We get to Lanning in a little bit and why we think he's going to be the next coach and what that means. But first, I think we have to reflect on Nick Saban. And, Jake, I know that obviously everybody listening knows, you know, I am a massive Roman history nerd, specifically a kind of rise of the Republic type of time. And the two books that kicked all of this off, I never read history until I was like 23 or 24 years old. And then I read Adrian Goldsworthy's Caesar, about Julius Caesar.
Yep.
Fascinating stuff. Awesome, right? Well, right after that, I dove into Augustus, Goldsworthy's follow-up, which is about Augustus Caesar, their Caesar Augustus, the second founder of Rome, the founder of the empire, really. And I just cannot shake the parallels between someone like between, and I've always said with college football and how kind of Roman politics, I cannot shake the parallels. And Augustus was singular. Here it is said, and tell me this doesn't sound like Nick Saban on his deathbed. He said, I found Rome a city of mud and left it a city of marble.
Yep.
Look at what Tuscaloosa looked like back in 2007 when Nick Saban arrived. And there's been some, there's like, okay, so Joe Pompliano had a really good tweet yesterday that really shows you what I would call the fruits of conquest, where you go to these foreign lands, you beat down on these opposing forces, and the money flows in and it spreads out throughout the community. So in his 15 years at Alabama, 6 national championships, 9 SEC championships, a 206-29 record. Sorry, 17 years. 206 and 29. But that doesn't tell nearly enough of the story. So the Flutie effect is when athletic accomplishments increase exposure and eventually in Roma, right? That goes back to Doug Flutie, Boston College, whatever. Since Saban arrived in 2007, Alabama's enrollment has increased from 25,000 students to 40,000 students. That is a 60% jump, while the national average is just 10%. But as Pompliano points out, the type of student matters much more. Alabama went from the majority of its student body being in-state students to majority out-of-state. Why is that important? Out-of-state pays 3 times the amount of in-state, $32K versus $11K. That means that Alabama increased its annual revenue by hundreds of millions of dollars a year. A year. And yes, they paid him $130 million over 16 seasons, but just napkin math dictates that this is well over $1 billion increase in terms of overall revenue for the school. And that, Jake, doesn't even get into the city of Tuscaloosa itself, which if you go back and you look at pictures from 17 years ago, looks like a different city.
That was my biggest point yesterday.
You would never guess.
Yeah.
City population, at a time when Louisiana population is declining, we have brain drain, we have companies and talented people leaving every single day, the city of Tuscaloosa has increased in population by 25% during Nick Saban's time. It's insane. It's insane. So he is literally a golden age, unparalleled leader. Nobody had a greater effect on his city, his college town, hometown, whatever you want to call it at this point, than did Nick Saban. And obviously nobody had a greater effect on the football field either. And winning and adapting and changing. And it's just, it is an impossible act to follow. And again, nobody ever really said anything they're said to have quoted, but Augustus on his deathbed, and I keep thinking about Nick with this, but basically said, if I've played my act well in this comedy of life, then dismiss me from the stage with applause. And that's how I feel Nick Saban should go. He's really going out in the same way. Nobody defeated him. He's just an old man who has decided himself to now move on, right? It is it's unreal. And we're never going to see, and guess what? Rome never saw anyone like Augustus again, and Alabama's never going to see anyone like Nick Saban again. Like, no matter how good Dan Lanning, doesn't matter how good anybody does, it will never be good enough. The man's, and I don't know, my initial reaction, Jake, I had like a booming peal of laughter, as much out of like shock, a little bit of joy, a little bit of relief. Then I felt like I had overwhelming feelings of respect.
Yeah.
Then an odd thing where it's almost like you always complain about the people in power, but what about when the people in power are suddenly gone? Like, what's next? Like, all of a sudden, it feels like chaos. Like, what comes? Yeah. We've gotten so used to him being there, and then gratitude. You can finally start to really engage, and you already knew this, but you can really engage the fact that, look, if you love LSU, that man is responsible for the reawakening of this place as well, and kicking off the football golden age here. So it's just a myriad of complicated emotions and thoughts and analogies that have been flying through my head. But at the end of the day, you can just sum it up by saying he is the greatest college football coach of all time. We overuse the term GOAT, but that is quite objectively that's just what he is.
Yeah, I saw some weird reactions to this news yesterday from a lot of different people, but I do agree with you. You go back and you see what he did for LSU football. It was a place that when I was growing up, it wasn't great. Like, celebrating Independence Bowls, like that's where you were. Like, you were excited to get to those type of bowl games, and obviously 1997 you beat #1 Florida. That's very, very exciting. But I mean, I'll never forget just him taking them to the SEC championship game and thinking this is utopia. Like, LSU gets to go to Atlanta and play for an SEC championship game, and then you win a couple of those and you win a national title, and it really sets the foundation for what you're able to do for the next 15, 16 years. I mean, outside of Alabama, we say it all the time. You've got the most national championships, right? And that was kind of put into place whenever Nick Saban and his staff come to Baton Rouge. And so there's no denying that. There's also no denying that he is the greatest football coach in college football history. Like, that's not even up for debate. And I know you can throw other names out there. It's just not. What he did during this time, when I believe it's more difficult than ever before to be dominant, he was as dominant as you can be. Like, you take 2007 out of it. If we just go like in different, we can go like this 5-year block, this 5-year block. Like, the things that he did were remarkable.
Yeah.
I mean, I think his worst finish outside of 2007 was 10th. Like 10th in the country.
It's in a sport where every single person is paid millions of dollars. Let's say every single person has his job. Every head coach is paid millions of dollars to do the exact same thing he's doing. So he is going against hundreds, over the years, you could say thousands of potential candidates that are trying to get what he has, and he stayed on top of them all throughout the entire thing. And I know that we like to talk about how LSU's power from a college football standpoint is a bit built into the soil, right? It's one of the great advantages why 3 head coaches in a row won national championships. But why didn't you win a national championship for 50 years? Because sometimes somebody has to show you your own potential. Somebody has to unlock that inside of you and show you what you're capable of when you may not believe it yourself. And suddenly when you realize you can, well, then going forward. And you see this all the time. Okay, Bo, you're a skateboarder, right? Nobody ever does a 900. Tony Hawk finally pulls it off. Now you got kids like, I mean, there's hundreds. Like, every time a new trick gets done, I remember the first double backflip was done by like Dave Meir. Every time a new trick gets done, it's shocking, it's amazing. And then right after, or like the 5-minute mile, the Bannister effect, right? Where finally the 5-minute mile is broken, then immediately after, like, sometimes you have to be shown what is possible. So, yes, well, Nick Saban's not responsible for LSU making it back to the Natty in like 2011, or responsible for Ed Ogeron winning Natty in 2019. He is responsible for that original awakening of the slumbering beast. And I just can't help but be grateful because he gave me some of the best memories of my lifetime, and my favorite memories with my grandfather. I mean, that's why I ended up here. which has now been the most impactful decision of my entire life. It's why I live here. I mean, the ripple effects of this man's legacy, I'll never forget going to the 2001 SEC championship against Tennessee with my grandfather. It's probably my favorite memory of me and him in my entire life. Spent the whole day, Dr. Pepper thing, all that, the fan events, throwing footballs, hanging out, getting excited for the game. Game starts, you're sitting like kind of middle upper deck and around Tennessee fans, and I'm just going crazy. He's going crazy. At the end of the game, some Tennessee fans throw beer on us from above us because he's rolling around going, "Your Roses have winned! Your Roses have winned!" Because they were going to go to the Rose Bowl, the national championship, and it was just such a moment of joy, and it's burned into my brain, and getting to experience national championships with my grandfather in 2003 and that SEC championship, and having him in the room eventually when I was offered by LSU, like that all in a weird way traces back, because the only reason I got to go to the game because it was in Atlanta and that's where I lived.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so if it wasn't there, I couldn't really go. Every other year I could maybe go to like an LSU Arkansas game for Thanksgiving, but it's just so you can't even fathom the ripple effects that this man has had on people's lives. I mean, look at all the millionaires he made. Look at all of his look at all of his assistant coaches: Kirby Smart, Steve Sarkisian, Lane Kiffin, Billy Napier, Dan Lanning, Mario Cristobal, Will Muschamp, Derek Dooley, Mark D'Antonio, Brian Daboll, Jason Garrett, Adam Gase, Mike Loxley, Butch Jones. Millionaires, one and all, who all came from his camp.
I can tell you, for me personally, it was always a weird deal because everybody in Baton Rouge was like, all right, Nick Saban, you're booing him, you're saying other things to him. And for me, he gave me an opportunity. He gave me an opportunity when others wouldn't. Like, he saw something in me that other coaches didn't. And he was as persistent in my recruiting as any coach out there. And I've told the story 1,000 times. He had no idea who I was. He comes out, he's watching an old school Oklahoma drill. He's like, all right, who's number 13? He was there to recruit our quarterback, John David Booty. And by the end of it, I got a scholarship offer from Nick Saban. And he changed my life. Like, I was not going to be able to go to the hometown school. I did not have an offer yet. I was going to go elsewhere. I was going to go to Texas and play for Mac Brown until Nick Saban allowed me the opportunity to come play at the place that I grew up loving and wanted to come play at. I'm not here. I'm not sitting in this chair. I don't know where I'm at. Who knows how my life ends up if I don't have that opportunity given to me by Nick Saban, because he recruited a little bit different. Sure, once he got to Alabama, he got every player that he wanted. But if you go back and you look at those rosters, he also would put in a 3-star guy. I don't think there's 2-star guys anymore. I don't think those exist. But he'll find like those diamonds in the rough, and he'll put them in the middle of his team because he realized what that was and how important it was to his team. And so, like, for me, man, I'll forever be grateful for what he did for me.
Yep.
And it was a relationship that, yeah, look, he's the coach at Alabama. I want LSU to beat Alabama every single time. But when I got drafted, one of the first people to reach out to me was Nick Saban. Once a year, twice a year sometimes, before I got into media. When I'm in the NFL, I get a call or a message from Nick Saban. In the media, I had a chance multiple times to interview him. I mean, I played 1 year for the guy.
Yeah.
I played 1 year for the guy, and he still – and that's one of the things that made him the best. Like, he still would reach out, check on me, check on my family, wonder how is life going. And, like, those little things, and you hear me say this all the time, the small things are the biggest thing to Nick Saban, and that's what made him great, because it wasn't micromanaging. It was covering every single aspect of his football program, even the ones that he had left before. Like, I talked with Spears on radio yesterday. Like, him and Spears talk all the time. I'm sure you could go back to players at Michigan State he reached out to. And so for me, obviously, I'm very, very grateful, T, for the opportunity that he gave me. Again, he believed in me when others didn't, certainly at LSU, because the recruiting territory coordinator, whoever that was, he didn't report back to go tell Nick Saban, hey, we got to go offer this kid from Evangel. No, it was Nick Saban actually coming to a practice and watching it with his own eyes is when I got the offer.
Wow, Jake, what incredible takes.
I mean, those guys, they're just the best.
I think so. And if you think so, again, hit the like button, subscribe, ring the bell so you get notifications when we post every single day here on OTB LSU.